Why study philosophy at all? What value does philosophical thinking actually provide? In the following lecture, we explore various responses to these questions, including some influential ideas from Bertrand and Russell. The value of philosophy, we could have arguably begun with this, and I do like to spend a little bit of time here at the very beginning of the semester talking about this. Like I was saying, we could have arguably started with this even before the intro lecture and the logic stuff, just because of how important it is, right, and why we're spending any time on it at all. What I'm about to say is basically, right, if we can't establish any value associated with our subject, why spend any time, let alone, what are we going to be here, 4 months, 3.5 months, right, a whole semester? Why spend a whole semester studying a subject which we can't discern any value from, right? Why do that? And so that's really the impetus for us taking some time to kind of wrestle with this issue. What's interesting, and I think I mentioned this actually on maybe one of the first few slides, is this is arguably just as debatable as any other issue in philosophy, right? What is the value of doing philosophy itself? Is there any? Okay, is it, maybe there is some value to it, but maybe the detriments or the negatives outweigh that, right? So if you were to do a cost-benefit analysis, right, is it overall more useful or less useful, right? That whole question is kind of what we're interested in, why we spend a little bit of time, again, talking about the value of philosophy. Hopefully, after the lecture, you will feel like there is some value, right, and that we should continue. Despite, as we, in fairness, we will try to illuminate both sides, right, and consider maybe some reasons to question its value as well, okay? But we'll see kind of both sides, and again, hopefully be able to establish some reason to keep doing what we're doing, right? Some value in philosophy. I mentioned Bertrand Russell. I fleetingly kind of alluded to him towards the end of the intro lecture when we got to the contemporary era. He's one of the arguably the most well-known contemporary philosopher. So he's a British analytic philosopher. There you have his dates up there. So 1872 to 1970. We talked about kind of the correlation. For whatever reason, there seems to be this correlation between philosophers and this aptitude for math, and Russell is another good example of that. He was well known as being a pretty good mathematician, a logician as well. He made major contributions and discussed logic a lot. Yeah, so, and again, just to reiterate that middle bullet point there, as mentioned in lecture 1, he is probably the most notable analytic philosopher and belonging to the contemporary era. This excerpt that we read comes from the Problems of Philosophy, written in or published in 1912. And I was actually chatting with the other full-time philosophy faculty member that we have. He teaches over at the Blue River campus, and we were chatting, and we were talking about, he actually mentioned how this could actually serve, this Problems of Philosophy book by Russell, could actually serve as like a textbook for an intro to philosophy class. And I've always actually had that kind of thought myself, because he does such a good job of like simplifying the basic philosophical issues that we will encounter ourselves throughout the course. He does such a good job of like simplifying those and making it very accessible, these very complex, difficult problems, making them very accessible to average, everyday people. And he really does kind of offer a broad survey of most of the essential philosophical issues. So that is a great book, and it's fairly short as well. So if you're ever bored and you're kind of getting into some of this stuff, I would highly encourage you guys to take a look at The Problems of Philosophy by Bertrand Russell. Okay, so let's move forward though. What question is he raising? And we kind of already alluded to the issue here. What's the value of our subject? All right, what is the value of philosophy? As I mentioned, I already kind of spoke to this. This seems like a good question to ask, especially early on, right? If we can't come up with or ascertain any value in doing philosophy, then why do it? Okay, so hopefully, like I said, we will be able to establish some value. Okay. And I mentioned this already as well, but this is arguably just as interesting and debated of an issue in philosophy as any of the other issues in philosophy. Just how useful, if at all, is philosophy? Maybe it does have some benefits, like I said, but maybe it also has disadvantages, in which case the question then is like, well, which outweighs the other? Right? So at any rate, that's kind of what we're going to try to examine here moving forward. Now that we've had our introduction to our subject, we'll begin exploring the value of philosophy, beginning with one of its most frequent criticisms, that it's simply not practical.